Okay, so continue with the presentation of the warehouse. I'm going to talk about and explore the security threats and information protection for this company. And we're going to start with the reasons why the system may be vulnerable, and specifically, of course, in the warehouse. So in this case, we explore how the warehouse may have a fragile password policy, and we found two scenarios in this vulnerability. So the first one, of the first size, will be the employees inside of the company do not have assigned password for each one. It's not equal and flat policy. It means like if you're an employee of the warehouse, it does not mean that you're going to have a password and username to access to the system. It doesn't have to be equal for everyone, as we may know by now, because the levels of the employees are different. But let's say people that is in the same job description, floor staff. So this will happen. They don't have assigned a password and username they can use. So this actually limits the behavior of the staff, because they may rely on other staff that they have access, and they can offer or provide a better service for the customers that come to the store. And another one is also they don't have strong policy. That means the intensity of or difficulty of the password can vary, and sometimes it might be too weak. And when it's weak, we know at this point that it can be penetrated, and this is not good for the company as well. Another issue that they can face is not having an operating system up to date. This means, as we may explore with the different companies by now, of course, the system itself needs to be updated each day. Technology, the world, of course, is going around all the time, and new things are coming up, threats and also improvements. So this one might be one of the issues that live at risk at any company, especially the warehouse. So because as we may know here, the security is compromised without effort if they don't put enough attention to keep up to date the information and the system. Now, in regards of the security challenge, the warehouse staff may have too many priorities, and it's true inside of the stores. This is something that it may happen. So we can see, and we discussed this. The staff floor in the warehouse is not there to especially be a personal. They're not focused on personal selling. They could be there to assist any client that comes to them and approach to them to ask something, but they're not there exclusively to sell and follow up that process for each customer. So, but in this case, if a customer comes, they have to actually pay attention to that. Aside, they have to develop the other activities they have. For instance, stock, replenishing of the shelf. They also have to check on the system if they have any need, or if there's something that needs to be taken care of. And overall, so they end up having too many priorities, and this could be a security challenge. When an employee does not follow a task just by itself, the mind is really unfocused on the things they have to do. And also, they may have a lack of expertise. And we can see, for instance, how people in the warehouse, some of them receive training, and just to give an example, in customer service, but others don't. And we are not sure how this pattern is decided inside of the company, as well as this information system. So at this point, we can ask, how can one employee have access and training and information about the system, but others they don't have? So of course, this is a clear security challenge that they may overcome. Now, moving on to security threats, the information system. This is one of the main ones, a physical disaster. I put there such as fire or power failure. And I think one of the reasons to consider this here in New Zealand, because as we may know, the warehouse is a nation-based company, a Kiwi-owned company. So here in New Zealand recently, we have been exposed to natural disasters, the volcano explosion, and then we have, for instance, earthquake. Last week, there was a report of one. It was a small scale, but this is something that we have to acknowledge, and it could be a threat for the information system. If we have a power failure due to earthquake, so this is something that needs to be kept in mind and considered. And the level of difficulty of the password, as I mentioned before, is if an easy password, it's really easy for an outsider to penetrate the system. And if they don't take care of the system, well, anyone can violate the system. Another important threat could be an error in the system. Well, and it needs to be acknowledged that errors can happen at any time. It's especially human errors. There's always a percentage or a percent of error if we are working with human. So we can always make mistakes, and that's something that needs to be considered. So for example, one of the errors that we can have is register wrong information in terms of the stock, of price items, of the size available for one item. And this, at the end of as result, can decrease significantly the revenues, or because one small action you cannot see the impact, but overall then it can have losses for the warehouse. It is also important to mention that the warehouse is also not fully protected against computer viruses. This is something that can also happen, and we need to acknowledge. As we may know, viruses generate an impact, a negative impact on the memory, on the files. They just corrupt the files. And worms that are malicious software that corrupt the codes of the operating system. And of course, this is something that it might be there, and it needs to be acknowledged as well. Now, moving on to information security policies, and this is how the warehouse protects the information access. At this point, and with this subject, we have seen how access might be not just in terms of money, but also in terms of information, and information is valuable. So, to start with, what they need to do and what they do is first a risk assessment. So they determine the value of the information, how much does really cost that information that they have, and they identify the possible risk, the level of threat that risk represent, and where are the patches that could be penetrated, or that could be a weak spot for people to violate the system over there. So this is the first thing that needs to be done. The second one will be establish a security policy. It's easier to establish a security policies when they have in mind where are the risks. So they could determine security protocols or guidelines to maintain the security of the company. So this is one of the most common one. And it might be possible that they ban the employees to use certain websites because it's not just productive for them, but also because it could be dangerous for the company. And of course, there could be authorization policies. So this means the upper level of the company and the corporative governance, they will have more access to information sensitive and delicate compared to the staff floor that they don't usually have that much access. Another thing is the warehouse need to manage the downtime, which is basically not to have a time off. They cannot allow themselves to have a time where the system completely crash. So this having a high capacity storage, for instance, a full turn-on computer system, which just create backups. So every time they may face a failure, they immediately have a backup before the failure. So when everything goes back, they can just go to where they were before. And the ultimate step will be an audit. So the audit is basically to identify where the weaknesses are and what will be the possible impact that this have to the organization. Now, continue with the most suitable tools and techniques that the warehouse could use to protect the information. We have some things to say. So, for instance, one of the common ones will be the firewalls. And this is basically a set of rules that they can determine to determine the behavior of the employees and how they want the users to behave in the red. For instance, this is one of the most common ones. I don't know if probably you guys in your previous job or in your current jobs now, are you banned to allow certain websites in the workplace? For instance, have you been allowed to not use certain websites when you were working? Yeah. So in my case, it's also happened. The previous company that I used to work, people were not allowed to use social media. Not just because the upper level considered that reduced the productivity of the people, but also it was because it could be dangerous as well for the information system. In my case, and this is what I mean, it's a set of rules, but it could be, these set of rules could be specific for every user, or it could be general. So even when everyone in the company was banned to use it, in my case, I was part of the marketing team. So they changed the protocol, and for my team, where we were allowed to use the social media because it was needed. Another thing will be the intrusion detection system. This is not something, the intrusion system, it just detects when an intruder is in the system. It doesn't do anything else, but it just say someone is here. Antivirus, of course, is something that is the most basic action that needs to be done. And authentication tools, which is basically to prove in a second time that the person that is going to use the system is the same one that is saying that is going to be in the system. It could be through a message or email, another thing. This is my last part, is problems associated with the traditional filing. And some of the classical mistakes or classical failures that we can find is that the redundancies of inconsistencies. And probably this happened with, we have in the system the same person with two email addresses, for example. Or we have the same email addresses with two names. And this could happen easily because if a person just enter the information to the system, but I don't know, they don't listen well, or they just misspell the name, that the redundancies and inconsistencies just can come. So they will have information stored in different places, but it's the same information as well. Another thing will be the lack of flexibility. So when we have a system that is settled, all done, finished, it might be hard for the system to require things that the system is not get used to do. And if we want to report that never have been asked before, the system is actually not going to be that easy to obtain, or new information, because the system is not prepared for that one, for that unrequested information. Poor security. People entering new information, deleting information that can be vital, and just altering the information all around without being supervised. that's all. Thank you so much.